Welcome to December Sometimes with Benny, Ayo guy. So listen, this episode is not going to be brought to you by my studio. It's going to be brought to you by me driving home. And why is that? Because sometimes, just sometimes, I feel like the thoughts that I have to be brought to you by an episode at the exact same time as I'm thinking about them. And unfortunately, while I was at work all day long thinking about this beautiful episode that I was going to establish, I couldn't do it because I was at work. So the best time for me to do it is right now while I'm driving, and because I'm also going to release a part 2 to this episode because I'm going to interview my wife about the exact same topic. But for your viewing pleasure, my wife has no idea what the topic is. I just told her, hey, as soon as I get home and the kids go to bed, we're going to do an interview and we're going to talk about a topic. She asked what topic. I said, don't worry about it because it'll keep it away. So, I want to talk about marriage. I want to talk about marriage while on recruiting duty. How to keep the marriage alive, how to keep the marriage going. And that's because, we lose sight of what's important while on the duty. And what do I mean by that is that we get so caught up in winning and so caught up in, making mission and contracting and phase lines and all this stuff that we just get lost in the shuffle and we forget about all the things that are going on at home. We forget about the fact that because of us being on this strenuous duty, we forget that our lives, have other parts of it. And we forget that our families at home are dealing with all these things when we're around the corner. And unfortunately, because we're so mentally and physically and emotionally invested in this job, it takes away from our emotion and our physicality at home. Why do I say that? I say that because, I did an interview on Friday with a young man because I was in the office and I kind of helped out the recruiter. And one of the questions the young man had asked was, how do you enjoy the job of being a recruiter? And I said, well, speaking as somebody who no longer is a recruiter, it's just a different thing because we invest so much time into you mentally, physically, and emotionally that when we're done doing this interview, I asked him, I was like, hey man, how do you feel right now? We just did a 2.5-hour interview. How do you feel right now? He was like, great. I was like, no, I mean, how do you feel mentally, physically, and emotionally right now? And he was like, drained. And I was like, okay, now imagine doing that 2 to 3 times a day. Now, mind you, do we have three interviews a day, every day? No. Have we done it? 100%. And you and I both know after one interview, if you're good, first of all, if you're interviewing somebody and you don't leave the interview physically and emotionally just drained, then you're trash and you shouldn't be a recruiter and you should just go tell your RI and ARI that you're failing. And then somebody needs to help you. Because you should literally end every episode. You should literally leave every interview, no stone unturned, having uncovered everything and just battled through it all. And why am I bringing that up? I'm bringing that up because now after you've had this insane day, the last thing you want to ever do is go home and talk to your family. Or your wife or your kids or anybody, realistically. But that's the problem. The problem is that you've dealt with adult figures all day long. You've dealt with people over the age of 17 all day long. You've dealt with parents, you've dealt with people, and you've just talked. But the problem is that 9 times out of 10, especially being in the Marine Corps, we have stay-at-home jobs. We have stay-at-home wives. Myself not included in that. I have a wife who worked a full-time job and mothered 2 children. And either which way, my wife dealt with daycare. So a lot of the time, it would be the first time my wife would have a conversation with a grown adult when I got home. But instead, I was coming home late at night because I'll be honest, I would leave work, go to the bar, and then I would show up at home and I would tell my wife, oh, I'm on my way home. And then I would just end up getting bombed at the bar and show up 2 hours later, and she'd be falling asleep on the couch, having waited for me to come home. And that's where I was at fault, 100%. And to be honest, if I'm completely honest, and maybe my wife feels differently, I don't know, because we haven't done the episode yet, but if I'm honest, I'm very surprised that my wife didn't leave me. Because for 4 years straight, I was a very selfish individual. When I came home from work, I didn't want to be home. I wanted to go out and do things. I wanted to go hang out with my friends. I wanted to go hang out with anybody but my wife, if I'm honest. I wanted to go hang out with the people that were in my office. I wanted to go and be a part of, do things and go out and do things. But meanwhile, my wife would just want to sit home, want to be with me, would want to, relax and cuddle and watch movies or just fall asleep on me and stuff like that. But me, myself, I was just so caught up in everything but her and the kids, to be honest. And the reason why I wanted to do this episode was because somebody reached out to me saying, hey, you know what, you haven't done an episode on marriage. And a lot of people ask me, how did you and your wife make it through? Bro, if it wasn't for my wife, I don't know where I'd be. I would never have made it through the duty. And I say that because it's the truth, man. There was so many times, so many days where I would come home and I would tell my wife I was fucking done. I would come home and literally tell my wife, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. I'm emotionally, physically just done with this job. And then my wife would, even though I hadn't spoken to my wife all day, even though the last time I asked my wife anything about how she was doing, who knows when that was. But, I wasn't there. I was not there mentally, physically, and emotionally, spiritually for my wife as a husband. I wasn't there to help with the kids. I wasn't there to, take the kids to school. Like, my wife was doing all of those things. And it's crazy because, while you're in the moment, you're like, oh, none of that's a big deal, dude. How long does it take to do, how long does it take to get a kid ready? How long does it take to do a diaper? How long does this take? How big of a deal is it to get a kid ready for school? Or how big of a deal is it, to get a kid dressed for school? Or how big of a deal is it to get a kid to eat dinner? Now, a year later, dealing with my son and dealing with my daughter, now I'm like, bro, my daughter's a handful. And I realized that my wife did all of that on her own. My wife dealt with 2 full-on pregnancies. She moved us out of our house into a new home while pregnant. We had our son. Then I got her pregnant again. We had a baby through COVID. What my wife has done is nothing short of a miracle. But the crazy part is that I'm realizing that now. I'm realized that after the fact. While all of this was happening, I wasn't giving her credit. I was coming home and saying, why isn't the house clean? Or I was coming home and saying, why didn't you make me lunch? Why didn't you do this? Or why didn't you do that? And the reality of it is that what was I doing to contribute to the household? Besides, being the breadwinner, besides, and that doesn't mean my wife doesn't have a job or doesn't bring money to the table, but that's the thing, is that I was justifying my lack of attention to my wife by saying, well, I'm always working and that's what it is. But then the reality of it is that if you really sit down and think about it, are you really always working? Do you really put in that many man hours? I was talking to somebody earlier today, and I was like, well, when was the last time, somebody had told me that they were having issues with their marriage and that their marriage might end, and then they were like, well, maybe at this point it's better off that way. And one of the things that I said to him was, bro, then why did you get married? I refuse to believe that when you got married that day, that you were standing up in front of your wife, in front of all these people, or even if you eloped, I refuse to believe that you sat there at that moment and was like, yo, this is gonna end in divorce and I'll be okay with it. I don't believe that. You know what I mean? And the thing is that why are we so quick to say, you know what, and maybe it's better off that way? I don't know the circumstances, but that's my point towards anybody. And I think that's why we have such an issue with divorce in today's day and age, is because we don't have open communication. because, and this is something that I've dealt with, and my wife has said to me before, is that, and I didn't understand it, well, when I was on recruiting duty, me and my wife would get into so many arguments about so many things, and it was always, like she would not want to go out, or she would not want to do something, and I would just be like, I just don't fucking get it, and I would get mad, and I would get angry, and I would yell, and then my wife would be like, well, Doug, you don't have to get it, it's not your, you don't, just because you don't feel that way, or just because you don't agree with it, doesn't mean that you have to get it. And that's the thing that I got so bent out of shape about. And it's the truth, though, is that we get so deep into these conversations with the bullies and with applicants and with parents, and we get so wrapped around the edges talking about influencers, positive and negative, but yet we don't do that in our own lifetime. Like, when was the last time that you sat down with your wife and asked her, hey, what are your future goals? Hey, what do you want for our marriage? Hey, what do you want to eat? What restaurant do you want to go to? But when have you ever, and you know what I mean? And then that's the thing too, is when you do go out, are you on your phone the entire time? Are you constantly texting? Are you constantly DMing? Are you, and a big thing too is that there's a very big difference, right? So you have people that are one of two people. You either have the one person who does not want people or their family to know what work is. They leave work at work, they don't bring it home, they never speak about it. Or you have the other person who you come home, you explain to them what's going on so that they understand why you're annoyed, why you're uptight, and stuff like that. Me, I always let my wife know what was going on, because a lot of the time my wife would then be able to tell me, well, Doug, you shouldn't be mad at that, or Doug, you should be mad at that, or my wife would course correct me. And my wife also helped me a lot on recruiting duty. Like, a lot of people say, leave your wife alone, leave your wife out of it. No, bro, I taught my wife A through Z about recruiting duty, to the point where my wife could help me do things so that when I got home, she could help me with administration and I could be with my kids. Because I would have to close things out, or I would, and I took a long time at paperwork with certain things. So my wife would help me out with certain things. Or like, she would close out events and she would ask me, hey, what did you do with this? Boom. And then I would tell her. So I used my wife, and the thing is my wife enjoyed being included. I included my wife in family days. I included my wife in pool events. And I also did that because I wanted the police to be able to see that I was a family man, and that you could still be in the Marine Corps effectively while having a family. I brought my wife to get parental consent. So every parent I had, they all knew who my kids were. They all knew who my kids were. They knew who my wife was. They knew everything about my life, and it helped open up to them. Now, going back to what I was saying, though, I could have been a lot better of a husband, and I say that because I never asked my wife, "Hey, what can I do for you?" Or I would ask my wife, "Hey, what do you need while I'm out and about, and I'll get it for you." And she would tell me, and I would never get it. I would come home and she'd be like, "Where are the groceries?" And I'd be like, or I'd be like, "I got them, but they're at the office." And it's like, well, then what the hell is the point of me asking you? What's the point of you asking me to give me something if you're not going to get it? No point. So a lot of the time, or, when I would come home, I would never ask my wife, "How are you doing?" I would never ask her about work. I would never listen to her about what was going on in work or things. Or she would tell me an elaborate story about work and about what's going on, and then there'd be like a follow-up to it, and I'd be like, "What are you talking about?" And it's like, no, we had this conversation. Not a clue. So many instances, so I think I know I know there's a lot of things that I could have done better as a husband. And I think that there are things that we can all do at all places in life. And it doesn't have to be recruiting center, but being on the duty, you're so focused on getting things done in a perfect manner that if we treated our marriages like we treat recruiting duty, things would be so different. But the problem is, and this is my honest opinion, is another reason why I started the podcast, is that, we have command members who are 8412s, right? And people who've been in these, some of them who have been on recruiting duty for 15 plus years, right? I have a friend who I was just talking to today, and I was like, hey man, how many times have you been married? He's like, twice. I'm like, no, I started marriage now. First marriage was 12 years. He got divorced while on recruiting duty, and he's going to come on the episode and talk about it at some point. I don't know the story, but when I asked him, would you help me do an episode on marriage and recruiting duty, he was like, fuck yeah, let's go. Now, why do I bring this up? Because when you go to these all hands, all we talk about, and I get it, I've said this before in the podcast, there's prescribed training that has to get done. There's modules that got to get done. There's MC3, there's certain PowerPoints, certain classes that we get. I get it. But how come they never give us classes on alcoholism, suicide, and marriage? Why not? Why do we not talk about the three things that are plaguing recruiting duty? Why? Why do we not even talk about it? And it's like there's so many marriages that have literally been ruined due to this. And I'm not going to say due to this duty, because the reality of it is that Marine Corps recruiting duty didn't get you a divorce. You got yourself a divorce. But the problem is that nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about making time for your family or for your children. And the thing is, though, is that nobody cares about your family more than you do. And if you don't care about your family, then they don't. And that is the truth of the matter. Why do I say that? I had a commanding officer. It was 2 days. It was like, it was about a week before my EAS. And I was supposed to I was waiting on my re-enlistment to get approved. And everybody kept telling me, you're good, you'll be fine, it's not going to be a big deal, blah, blah, blah. And finally it came to it, and it was like the middle of the month in February of 2020. And all of a sudden, I get this notification. My CEO comes in the office, comes to talk to me, and he's like, Bennett, what's wrong? What's going on? And I had just missed phase line. And my boss is like, my CEO, my commanding officer is like, Bennett, what's going on? Talk to me. And I looked at him and I was like, sir, I don't know if I'm going to have a job tomorrow. Like, you're here and you're only talking to me about numbers, about phase lines, about all this stuff, and I got it. It's important. Will I make mission? I will make mission. Guarantee you, promise you, I'm going to make mission, right? That's why I'm here. But I'm kind of worried because I might not have a job. And he literally says to me, Bennett, you're a cat. You'll land on your feet. That is what this man tells me. As I'm having panic attacks, I called the XO at the time, and I'm on the phone with him like, sir, I don't know what to do. I'm flipping out. I'm not going to have a job here in 2 weeks. I'm literally bugging out because bro, I have a house. I have kids. I have a kid on the way. Like, I have all of this stuff going on. And when I ask you about what's going on with my package, with my re-enlistment, all you tell me is, hey, you're a cat, you'll land on your feet. And then in the same breath, you tell me, worry about what's most important, and that's making mission. And that's why, the reason why I tell you that story is because that right there is proof in the pudding that nobody gives a shit about your family more than you do. And if you don't make the time for your family, then you're going to fail them. But now mind you, I'm not saying to go that gives you any wiggle room to be a piece of shit. I'm not saying any of those things because I had a Marine who worked for me and who I would literally tell, listen, man, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. And if you do X, Y, and Z, you can go home right now. And guess what? He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. He would have no show after no show after no show. And then when I had to hold him to the fire, I would ask him, like, does your wife know that you sit on TikTok all day? Does your wife know that you sit on your phone all day long? And that the reason why you can't go home tonight, when your wife makes Facebook statuses about how her husband hasn't been home, does she know that it's your fault and it's not mine? And that's part of the problem. Part of this problem is that there's two different types of staff at COICs. You have a staff at COIC who really gives a shit about his Marines and that wants to send you home. And then you have another staff at COIC who doesn't give a fuck. And he'll have you at work until 1:30 in the morning just because. He'll have you in dress blues in the summertime just because. And, but the problem is that the ones that actually give a shit about you and your family, you take advantage of. When you come in the office and you're like, hey, staff sergeant, I got to go do such and such on Saturday. And that staff sergeant says, okay, hey, listen, today's Monday. I need you to do all this shit so that on Saturday you can afford to have a day off. And then guess what? You fuck off the whole week and you don't do what you need to do, and you still expect that boss to say, hey, you're good for Saturday. I was talking about quality of life this morning. That's part of the problem. Part of the reason why marriages don't last on recruiting duty is a lot of it has to do, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm never going to sit here and point the blame at the recruiting command. I'm not. At the end of the day, you're in charge of your marriage. But I do believe that they fail epically when it comes to taking care of the Marines and their families. We don't have counselors that go out and talk to you guys. We don't have counselors that go and talk to you. And that's another thing you got to think about. Most active duty Marines, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Well, you can't because you're listening. But hey, it'll be this topic of discussion. Most of you move around the United States. You get stationed in new stations. You get PCS, right? Your wife and or husband, because it could be both roles, your wife, we'll go with that, doesn't know anybody in fucking Arkansas. So while you're at work all day long, your wife is alone. I had a friend, a very close friend of mine, on the duty with me. His wife has anxiety, deals with a lot with depression, and she doesn't make friends well. And the first 7 or 8 months of them being here, we never met her. We just heard about her. And then finally, she worked up the courage to come hang out at one of our houses. Boom, her and my wife became best friends. All of a sudden, they get PCS, they leave New Jersey. But the point of them that I'm trying to make is that something that we don't realize as husbands or as wives, as the active duty Marine, is that you're at work for the whole day, 4 to 5 people, and 9 times out of 10 are your friends. They're people that you could bullshit with, people that you would joke around with, people that things get done. Your wife or husband, on the other hand, is at home in a town in which they know nobody, and they have no one to talk to besides the wall, or your toddler or your child, or they're on Facebook or they're on the phone with people from home. But 9 times out of 10, they're sitting home alone with nobody to talk to. And the reason why marriages start taking a plummet is because by the time you come home, you don't want to talk. And now your family isn't communicating the way it needs to, and that's how the bad shit starts creeping in. And and unfortunately, not to get into my sex life, But, I can simply say me and my wife have always been intimate. But there are people who end up becoming less intimate because of these things, and then that's how affairs start. That's how all these things start, because I came home, I wanted to be intimate, but you weren't in the mood, and now you're aggravated at me, and I'm mad at you, and now we go on this week-long binge of not talking to each other, and now it becomes this huge vicious argument. And that's the thing, man, is that, like, advice that I would give to people is that you need to take the time to talk to your spouse and find out what is going on. What is going on? What am I doing? And that's the thing, is you have to be humble to understand and to fix what you can. Because a lot of times you'll say, hey, tell me what's wrong. And then they tell you what's wrong. I'm sorry that I had some on my nose. You say, hey, tell me what's wrong. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. And then that person tells you, and you're like, no. And then I've been this person. And again, I'm curious as to see what my wife will say when she's asked these questions. And I feel like a lot of the stuff that I'm telling you, it might be a lot of the stuff that she says. But that's the thing, man, is that we ask for criticism and we ask, how can I do better? And then they tell us, and we're like, no, that's not true. And then we have a laundry list of how they can be better. Oh, you never do the laundry, or oh, you never take the dog out, or oh, you never take the trash out. And and it's those simple things that'll go a long way. Like if you wake up and you throw out the trash and your wife doesn't have to remind you of it, that was something huge. Bro, when I was on recruiting duty, my wife is like, bro, why do I have to tell you every Monday and Thursday to take out the trash? Like, why do I have to remind you? And I would be like, I don't know, man. And even to this day, like 9 times out of 10, I take it out. I started this new thing that works for me. I leave the trash at the street the whole week, so that when my wife tells me, or when I notice that the garbage is full, I will just take the garbage to the street, and then I never have to bring the garbage to the street. Guess what? I'll never forget to throw out the trash. Perfect. But why am I bringing that up? Because we all fall short. Every one of us falls short. Every one of us has an issue. Every one of us needs to be better. And the reality of it is that we don't take the time to find out what is it we need to do to be better. What do we got to do to be a better husband, spouse, father, brother, all those things? Or like when you go on leave, if you have the ability to. Bro, I remember when I went on leave, I was on the phone constantly with my commander. I was constantly on the phone with my MEPS liaison, and he was constantly like, dude, you have an A-gunner, use it. And that was my fault. You know what? I didn't train up my even though my A-gunner 100% could have dealt with it. I just felt like I had to be in the pie. Felt like I had to be the one serving it up. So that's a huge part of it too, is if you really want to work on your marriage while on a duty like this, you need to just be better at scheduling. You need to be better at scheduling. You need to put time in your schedule. And I'm serious. People say that all the time, but it's true. Schedule time in your SNR, and then and schedule it out so and then in your morning meetings, let your staff and COIC know, hey, I have an event this week with my wife. I really want to go to that. What do I got to do to get to that? And as a staff and COIC, you need to ask your Marines, hey man, what are some things that you want to be able to do with your family while you're on this duty? What are some things that you want to be able to do? Because realistically, a recruiting duty should be a time of growth, a time of experience, and a time for you to be able to go out and learn about your surroundings, because you may never be stationed in that part of the country ever again. Like you have Marines that are stationed in the tri-state area that never go out. They never go out and travel. They never go and see these beautiful sights, and their children don't see them, and all this stuff. And it's like, why? Oh, well, because I was always working. So why should your family have to lose out on that? And then, you have the holidays coming up. if you're trying to find in-month contracts in the month of December, you're out of your effing mind. If your command and if your staff at COIC is telling you that, they're out of their mind. Because the reality of it is the chance of you finding a fucking same month in-month contract is fucking out of this world. You should have been working since fucking June. You should have, and that's the thing, every year, oh guys, we're going to get ready for FBAMJ, and we're going to get ready for the holidays, and you guys got to work harder now so you can deserve your holidays, which you're supposed to give me because they're given to me because I'm supposed to have a 72, but you're right, I should lose my right to have those days off, so I should work harder now to get what's owed to me. You got it. Makes sense. And then we work harder all year long, and then those times come and we still don't get the days off. So why do I bring that up? Because you as an office need to come to an understanding of how to give yourself the time that you need and your family needs. Bro, even if it's in the office, like I used to do with my Marines, man, hey, listen, what we're gonna start doing is Saturdays, only 2 of us come in, the other 2, they have the weekend off. Your weekend is this weekend, your weekend is that weekend. And as long as everyone's writing their contracts, then we can have a comfortability where hey, this weekend is your weekend. If you want to plan something to go away, plan something to go away. The thing is that nobody is making a plan to ensure that everybody in the office has family. The other problem that you have is that there's single Marines in the office who just don't give a fuck and are completely content with never leaving their house. With never leaving the office. Then you have Marines whose marriages are already broken and they just don't want to go home to see their wives, so they're completely okay with not going home either. So you, as an office, need to come together as a group of people and say, you know what? This is what we're going to talk about, and this is what we're going to do to make it work. Because my marriage matters to me, my children matter to me, and I want to be able to be there for my child. And that's the thing, man, is there's a lot of people on the duty that deal with so much shit. There's people who are on the duty who joined the Marine Corps at a later age, who have grown children, like a buddy of mine. He has a 16-year-old daughter, and 2 13-year-old kids. So he has grown-ass teenagers that he's dealing with while here on recruiting duty. So everybody's dealing with things at a different age, different way of life, and which is it's annoying, but nobody wants to talk about how they made it through, or nobody wants to talk about their fucking mistakes and how you can not make my mistakes, which is what I want to do, which is why I'm completely transparent with how I failed. And again, if it wasn't for my wife being my wife, I think any other woman would have left me, honestly. I think any other woman would have left me because I wasn't there. I honestly, if I'm completely honest, for 4 years of my entire life, for 4 years of my life, I was a Marine Corps recruiter and nothing else. If you look at pictures, I was there. I was in a photo, but was I mentally and physically there in the moment? Probably not. And it sucks. It sucks. I don't remember the first 2 years of my son's life. I don't. Now luckily I'm off the duty, and and that's the thing too that I try to explain to people is that you're going to miss things that you'll never be able to get back. You'll never be able to see or hear your kids, say their first words or walk their first steps or any of those things, and it's because you're on this duty. And now the thing is, though, is that while rewarding the duty that's what you got to make sure. Is you got to make sure that you're doing the right things while you're at work, so that it's not bad that you're at work. But if you're at work and you're doing the negative things, having an affair or doing alcoholic things or doing this and that, bro, dude, I'll be completely honest. There was a time where I left my office. I'm not going to tell this whole story because it's kind of I don't want to say grotesque, but I'll just tell you this. There was a time where I used to, so I lived closer to the PCS than I did the RSS. So what I did was I dropped my car at the PCS, and then I would drive to the RSS, right? So on my way home one night, it was like 9 o'clock. I come home, I come back to the office, and I see that one of the recruiter's cars is still in the parking lot. But he had left like an hour before I did, so I was like really weirded out, like why is that a thing? So I left the office, so I get to the office, and I go in the office, and the Marine's in the office. All the lights are out, and the Marine's in the office. It's like 10 o'clock at night. So I just got in my car and left. All I'm going to say is nothing, like he wasn't having an affair, or he wasn't doing anything like that. But it was just like, I don't know what he was doing. He was just in an office by himself with the lights off. And again, it was just like, dude, I let you go home 3 hours early. And instead of going home, you went to another office to not go home to your family. Like, I don't know. And my thing is, and the reason for me bringing that up is because that was a thing that happened a lot. Like, there were, as a staff in COIC, I'd be like, you know what, guys, I'm going to let you guys go home early today. Go home and deal with your family. And then, like, 4 or 5 hours later, I'd get a call from their wife, and their wife would be like, hey, do you know what time so-and-so is going to get home tonight? And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have, and I wouldn't tell their wives, but I'd be like, oh, I'll have them head out now. And then I would call the Marine, I'd be like, bro, what the fuck are you doing? Oh, what do you mean, Cesar? Where are you? Oh, I'm on my way home. Bro, I sent you home 3 hours ago. Why are you not home? Like, and that's again what I'm saying. If you have a staff in COIC who's going to go out of his way to give you the ability to leave at a decent time, to leave when you can leave so that you can go and deal with your family, then go be with your family. And if you had, and that's the thing too, is that, being a staff at COIC, these recruiters, you guys think that we should know everything about your lives. We don't, man. I have my own shit that I got to deal with. So if you don't tell me about an anniversary, if you don't tell me about a birthday, if you don't tell me about an event that's coming up, well, then that's on you, bro. You know what I mean? But there was times where, like, my wife had a miscarriage. I called my boss and I was like, hey, man, like, do you mind if I head home in and just be with my wife for the day? One of my dogs died of cancer. My boss was like, hey, listen, man, I get it. If you want, you can go home and be with your wife. So, and that's the thing. And a lot of times we think that we can't do these things, but we don't ask. You know what I mean? And if you're at work until all hours of the night and nothing's getting accomplished, bro, like, come on. Like, at this point, like, what are we doing? Like, if you're still on recruiting duty and this is a way of life that we're still living, you're out of your fucking mind. Like, bro, I worked for a college, right? And after the year went by with COVID and everything, they did the analytics and they did the numbers, and they realized that we didn't get contracts or appointments from Saturday interviews. They realized that they were having us come in on all these Saturdays, and we weren't getting anything. They were like, bro, we're not getting anything on Saturdays, so you know what we're going to do? We're just going to not have you work on Saturdays. And the reality of it is that if you really took the numbers and you showed the timelines, right, because you can, if you looked at your numbers, what do you get after Friday at 5 o'clock? Friday night after 5 o'clock, unless there's some high school football game going on, realistically, what are you getting? Saturday, if you're going to work, why are you working before 1 o'clock? Why not leave Friday at a reasonable hour, go get stuff, go to dinner, have some time with your family, Saturday morning, wake up with your kids, get breakfast, do some breakfast with your kids, play some games or something, show up to work midday. The problem with recruiting duty is that y'all are working all of these hours, but you're not working. You're present, you're there, you're accounted for, but you're not there actively working. So maybe if you actively worked, you'd have more time to spend with your family. And bro, that's just me being real, bro. That's me. That was me when I was a recruiter. Because my boss would tell me. My boss would tell me, you're gonna be at work until 11 o'clock at night, no matter what. So what did I do? I went and fucking gaffed off in the parking lot. I went and, hit up the restaurants. Like, I went and did everything but what I needed to do because I knew I was gonna be at work all day. But if you told me, hey, listen, if you find me 2 solid appointments for tomorrow, you can go to fuck home right now, guess what? I would do that too. So the point of the matter is that we got to stop working so many long-ass hours. We just got to get the shit done. And the problem is, though, is where you have the problem is that you have offices that do that shit, but then guess what? The other RSS down the street didn't do what they needed to do, so I have to work you more hours because that dude didn't do what he wanted to do. So it's this vicious cycle of that. So I just pulled up to the crib. That's going to be the end of this first episode. Again, just be a better person. Be a better human being. You don't have to get divorced if you're on recruiting duty. And don't think that you can't have children while on recruiting duty. I had 2 kids through FMIM. Both kids born in April. And my wife did it. I did it. We made it through. Again, it was mostly on my wife. I wouldn't have done any of this without her. And I say that 1,000 times over. And I'm going to drop this now. And then we'll do episode 2 as soon as the kids go to bed. And hopefully I can help you guys, through that episode. So, adios.